For enterprises that are moving all their data to the cloud, what actual options do they have? What integration options do they have to increase their data security?
One of the best options that they can use with Office 365 is actually to implement Active Directory Federation services. And that allows you to control access based on the identities that your organisation already has, so the ways that people log on to Windows. You can then use role-based access to provide people with the ability to get into certain parts of that infrastructure. So, for example, you could have a document library on SharePoint and allow just sales managers to have read access to it, and allow salespeople to have read and write access to that same document library.
And that makes it sound like it's just as secure, possibly even more secure than actually having local data storage. But can that genuinely be true?
Absolutely. It's almost exactly identical, and certainly from a management point of view, it fits into exactly the same ways that an IT organisation would already manage their identity and already manage their access controls.
And talking about controls, Connor, as the CEO of a Microsoft Gold partner, I'm sure you get this question quite a lot, but how does an enterprise actually retain control of the data?
They retain control of the data because they have total access to it, just like they would have as if it was sitting locally. So they retain control in that respect. And because it's integrated to AD, the security system they already use, they can use the same groups, policies that they already apply internally.
But do you find that you face certain objections from the IT directors?
Generally not, because at IT directors level, people are already used to using some form of cloud or hosted service already. They already understand the security implications.
So there's no theme that comes out, no particular question that occasionally pops up that you have to say, oh, that one again, and then give the reassuring answer?
Around data security, it's generally, back to the standards. What standards do they implement? Are they the right standards, etc.? It's those kind of questions that we get asked.
And what about the Patriot Act? I mean, is that something that should be concerning the enterprise?
It's an interesting thing that the Patriot Act is often associated with cloud. If we look at what the Act is, it allows the US government to access data when they're investigating terrorism or acts of espionage. So you have to ask yourself, does my data really come under risk under that category? It allows the US government access to the data after they've followed a very stringent legal process, and once they have access to it, then there's a framework put in place that tells them what the US government can do with it. So that takes away the risk of, say, industrial espionage or something along those lines. There's also other acts around the world that do something very similar. RIPA in the UK allows the UK government to do pretty much the same kind of thing. And also, because it is for the prevention of terrorism, governments interact with each other, they work with each other. So things haven't really changed. There's always been mechanisms for governments to access the data of companies that store that data within their jurisdiction. So I guess overall, it's not something that I think that most people need to be too concerned with. They need to be much more concerned about looking at their data, understanding their data, and make sure that they're doing the right thing with that data for their customers.
So what sort of practical measures are you thinking of there that they need to put in place before they even think about moving all their vital data to a cloud service such as Office 365?
Well, the first thing to do is make sure that they've got identity locked down properly. So implement a single form of identity for the organisation. Ensure that they have correct access controls around that and authentication, so that you don't just need a very simple password to access somebody's identity. And then thirdly, make sure that the data actually has access controls placed around it, so that only specific individuals, potentially even from specific locations and specific devices, can access that data.
So could I, as a business owner, could I actually set that up locally beforehand? So my concern with that would be I would move to a cloud-based service. Suddenly, for the period of the time it takes me to actually lock it all down, it'll be open and visible to everybody on the web. I take it I could sort that out locally, either on my local Exchange server or my local setup, and then migrate it.
Absolutely, yeah. Most organisations already implement this. It's something called Active Directory. So most organisations use Active Directory to allow people to log on to Windows and access file shares locally. That is just extended into Office 365. Pretty much, yeah.
And what are the biggest technical difficulties that you find, Connor, that your customers find when they are making this transition?
There's no major technical difficulties, but there are minimum standards to be achieved, or minimum prerequisites, as most people call them, that have to be achieved before you can go and do that. So you need to understand them. And you also need to understand that it's now a service and not something you're running locally.
And one of the words that's come up a couple of times is trust. And how do I actually, as an enterprise, I need to be able to trust the vendor that I'm working with. What should I be looking for to actually know that I can trust them?
Again, a brand name like Microsoft, it's a global name, global brand. Those kind of organizations have to invest a lot of time and a lot of money in building that trust, and they can't afford to lose it easily. You can imagine what would happen, or the implications that happen for BlackBerry in terms of their service being down for 3 days. Can people trust them? But most people's data is already in the cloud, in some, especially email, is in some shape or form. Because if you're sending emails, they're already out in the cloud. If you're sending them externally, if you're using BlackBerry, then it's already out there in BlackBerry's NOS. So this data is already out there, so people are already trusting it.
So the final word to you, Simon, what would you say? What's your final piece of advice to someone, to an enterprise IT director, let's say, who is concerned about security?
Look at the suppliers that you're thinking of for the tender. Then look at their characteristics around how they run their practices, how they look after their data centers. And thirdly, do the same due diligence that you would with any partner or supplier.
Okay, Simon, everyone, thank you very much.